Hello, everyone. Welcome to Systech's live webinar today. Today we are going to focus on empowering healthcare providers with cloud-enabled analytics modernization with our presenters, Yusuf, Mark, and Ramki. I'm Vaishnavi Golapudi, your moderator for today's webinar and director for marketing at Systech. And before we begin, I'd like to introduce our expert speakers. First is Yusuf Ghulam Hussain. Yusuf is the Chief Technology Officer for Systech Solutions and has been instrumental in Systech's efforts in bringing new products and solutions to market. Yusuf's leadership and deep expertise in data and analytics has given him an edge while establishing Systech as a niche player in the field. Our next speaker is Ramki Ranganathan. Ramki is the Vice President for Data and Analytics for Systech. He's been at the helm for many of Systech's technology initiatives. He's the head of advanced analytics and cloud at Systech, innovating on novel technology frameworks and solutions for clients across industries. And joining them today is Mark Cusack. Mark is the Chief Technology Officer for Yellowbrick Data. Before joining Yellowbrick, Mark was the Vice President for Data and Analytics at Teradata, where he led a variety of product management and technology teams in data warehouse and advanced analytics groups. He was the chief architect of Teradata's IoT analytics effort. Mark joined Teradata from the start of Rainstore, where he was a co-founding developer and chief architect. Prior to Rainstore, Mark was a lead scientist in the UK Ministry of Defense. Welcome all. And before we start, I'll cover a few housekeeping basics. We have carved out some time for Q&A towards the end of the session. So type your questions into the Q&A box of your control panel, and we will get to it right after the presentation. Now, without further delay, Yusuf, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar. My name is Yusuf, Chief Technology Officer at Systech. The topic for today's webinar is about analytics modernization with cloud, aiming towards transforming healthcare driven by data and analytics. And before we talk more about the whole modernization aspect of analytics, I just want to briefly talk about the need and the urgency to focus on any of these modernization transformational initiatives. Now, as we all know, and we're coming right out of COVID, during the pandemic, we saw, there was a profound effect on a bunch of businesses due to COVID, and a whole lot of businesses completely shut door, went under. At the same time, the ones that were able to survive and even thrive were the ones that were digitally savvy, and they were primarily digitally native in a sense that the adoption of data analytics and technology earlier in the cycle truly helped them ride that wave and adapt to that critical market change, which was, a transforming activity that happened across the globe. Right now, coming out of COVID, what we see is a need for businesses to build a new business digital platform, which essentially is a digitally connected ecosystem of your customers, of your partners, of all your internal workforce, your employees, your internal business function, along with all the assets that are part of the enterprise ecosystem. And all of these different players interconnected and truly driven by data and analytics at its core. So the need of the hour, as we see in the marketplace, especially in the healthcare sector, is to build this new business platform, which is truly digital and truly driven by data and analytics at its very core. Now, the question we ask is, how does data analytics truly help companies adapt to changing market conditions, as we saw during COVID? Now, what data analytics truly enables is the ability for enterprises, companies, to truly understand quickly what's going around, the ability to sense what's happening in their ecosystem with their customers, with their partners, with the market condition, the ability to understand that and harmonize that information, the ability to then quickly experiment in terms of what is working, what is not working, what needs to change, and how do we come up with new ideas and then eventually act upon those new ideas. Now, data analytics at its very core truly offers all these four capabilities that help companies be more adaptive. And the key to being to kind of survive an event like a COVID or a pandemic is being adaptive, being able to change at the drop of a dime and come up with new business models, new strategies, using data as your driver. And that is the only way, as we see, as we go into the future, is a way companies can truly stay relevant and, more important, stay resilient, which is if any such event like a COVID comes up again, companies are much more prepared to tackle it and ride that wave in a positive fashion. So if you look at it, a new digital business ecosystem driven by data analytics at its core is paramount to not just the success and the growth of a company, but also very much critical in making sure that you stay relevant and stay resilient for any future uh, events like a COVID that had happened in the last 2-3 years. Right now, this whole aspect of pandemic has truly accelerated the need of this transformation, the transformation to build your organization around data, around the technology, and go digital. So you keep hearing this term digital transformation associated with data and technology. Let's understand what is digital transformation before we get into the details of analytics modernization per se. Uh, in simple terms, if you look at digital transformation, it's applying smart technology to remove point of friction in your key business processes. So it simply boils down to how do I effectively use modern technology uh, in solving my business problems and achieving the core business objectives of my organization. Now, if I summarize it, it's about the three ways in which technology truly helps achieving your core business objective. And I'll get to that in a second. The very first thing is digitization, which is how do I transform my manual processes into more of a digital process? How do I make my organization more digitally savvy? The next thing is once you're digital, the next step is to then try to automate as many processes, as many repetitive processes that could be automated, saving time, saving money. And finally, how do I truly apply intelligence at each of these different business functions and make each of the business function much more smarter and much more intelligent using data as a fuel? So essentially, if you look at it, the modern technology has truly evolved over the last couple of years, and it's constantly evolving. And within the healthcare sector, what we see is the top technology enabler, be it intelligent document processing. It's one of the key technology that's truly being adopted within the healthcare sector in processing manual text, unstructured documentation, which is prevalent across the healthcare industry, be it an employee's health record, be it any kind of prescriptions, any kind of notes from doctors. All of that rich information is not available in a consumable fashion. Now, technology like IDP, NEP, natural language processing can truly extract information from those unstructured documentation and make it available for analysis and insights. So that's just one example of how modern technology is being deployed within the healthcare sector in transforming businesses. The next big one in healthcare, again, is use of robotics. And again, taking back the example of COVID, Just imagine how many televisits have increased over the period of COVID, right? We were able to see the doctors virtually, and all that was enabled because of the providers were digitally connected. There was no need to go visit a doctor in person. And if I extend that discussion, we could take it as far as operating on patients without doctor being there using robotics. And we are seeing that the use of robotics increasing in the healthcare space as well. The next technology, which again very prevalent in healthcare, is use of IoT, all kinds of fitness devices to track patients on different levels of their indicators, be it their health, be it their blood pressure, be it their glucose level. All of this is possible using IoT fitness devices that could be then integrated into your ecosystem by looking at data that's constantly coming in and then taking the right proactive actions to provide better care and better service to your end consumers. And then finally, everything is infused with AI and machine learning. And that's how the world in healthcare is going, is about how do I apply intelligence to all of these different processes. Now, one again, get a great example of AI and machine learning in healthcare is the ability to look at patient records, the screens and the X-rays, and intelligently figure out or diagnose things that are not humanly possible. So AI and machine learning can truly add scale of process to any particular objective, be it identifying diseases, be it identifying patterns of, let's say, how cancer progresses across your body, and so on and so forth. So there's an immense use of AI and machine learning within the healthcare sector. Now, all of this at the very bottom is driven by data and analytics. Now, what is critical is building a robust data analytics ecosystem that can truly then drive the digital organization that I was talking about earlier. Now, what's the objective? The end objective of using technology is to serve your end business goals. And typically, you look at 5 different areas in which pretty much every industry looks at achieving those goals. And number one in today's world, especially coming out of COVID, is providing a lasting customer experience. And that essentially leads to growth, new revenue streams, and so on and so forth. So number one business objective of any organization, including healthcare, is customer experience. The number two is how do you improve your operations? How do you increase your efficiency, thereby reducing cost? And again, in today's world where we're almost looking at a recession-like economy, everybody has this agenda of saving, reducing cost footprint, saving on overheads, and so on. So applying data analytics to figure out where are the places where I could reduce cost, improve efficiency is becoming that much more critical. Along with that, obviously, there's a whole idea of how do I avoid risk? How do I avoid any kind of exposure that can bring about liability to us? And the last but not most important thing is, in this digital world, security is becoming paramount, not just data security, but overall ecosystem security, where there is an immense always threat of cyber attacks. How do I make sure that you are protected, your data, your ecosystem is protected? And more importantly, how are you compliant, making sure that any kind of personalized information doesn't leak out, especially in healthcare sector? And last but not the least, how do I use data analytics to come up with new product ideas, new business ideas that I can take to market that can then eventually increase my revenue stream? So the idea here, the whole concept of business transformation or digital transformation using technology is about achieving those core business objectives using data and using technology. So it becomes extremely important for companies to build a sound data analytics ecosystem. So let's look at how that ecosystem looks like. Now, Systech's modern data analytics framework serves as a guide in building that required ecosystem. And I talked about how data analytics extends that adaptive business advantage. Our modern data framework is built along the same lines. It allows you to sense what's happening around your ecosystem. So the very first step on the far left is, how do I collect all kinds of data from my various internal and external operation systems, right? This could be your enterprise data. This could be your third party data you're collecting from your vendors. This could be data generated by your IoT devices, your apps, your images, your pictures, X-ray images, your CT scans, and so on and so forth. How do I ingest all of these different data into an environment where it is consumable? And that's the most critical part. Data is available everywhere, but is it all consumable for analytics? So the very first step is about sensing. So the first framework is about, how do I make sure that all of these data sources are, are truly consumable for downstream analytics, right? Now, the second step is, yes, you have all of these data set. How do I harmonize that data set for a specific end business objective? And we talked about a bunch of different objectives, be it your customer experience improvement or operational efficiency improvement and so on. So depending on your core business objective, you would want to harmonize your data in a way that it's usable downstream. Now, when I use the word harmonize, I don't necessarily talk about bringing everything into one big pool of data repository. The way the world is changing is that data is distributed and will stay distributed, because there are applications everywhere around your ecosystem. There are enterprise applications, there are applications on the edge, there are internal applications, there are applications that serves your customers. Now, the idea is to build a data fabric, as you see it, using a microservices architecture that allows you to interactively with all these data points without necessarily having to move them all the time, right? So it all depends on the business objective, how you end up harmonizing your data. So the second step right in the middle of our framework is about harmonization and collection of data for end user consumption. And that for us is a critical piece. And what technology you use for your data harmonization and data storage will truly drive how much you can extract value out of your data. And a little later in a webinar, we'll learn about one such technology called Yellowbrick that truly fits in that distributed data model that we evangelize using our data framework. Now, once you have your data harmonized, the next thing is to use that data to understand the trends, the patterns, and drive insights out of it. So how do we build intelligent apps using data is how the experimentation will help you identify trends and pattern and eventually act upon those trends and pattern to make all of your end business processes that much more smarter and that much more intelligent, right? So the whole idea, as I was talking earlier, is a robust data analytics platform at the very core will help you be more adaptive, stay current and stay relevant, as I was talking about, and more importantly, stay resilient for any future pandemic-like activity that could happen. Now, yes, it is important to build this whole data and analytics framework, and a lot of companies are building it, and they are in their various stages of this whole transformational journey, right? But the key point is that technology is also evolving at speed of light, and staying current and modern on different technology that kind of serves these different purposes is absolutely critical. So how do you now constantly stay current and stay on top of modern technology is the way to achieve true business value out of data analytics, right? And it's not just important to stay current, but the key factor is time to value. How can you react to market faster is only when you're able to modernize faster. So how do you now accelerate your modernization journey so that you could stay current and you can respond faster to changes in market condition? Now, next speaker, I want to bring up Ramki to talk about our whole acceleration and modernization approach that Systech evangelizes, so you could truly leverage the value of analytics at speed of light. Ramki? Over to you.
Thank you, Yusuf. So that was very informational. So I think there is no doubt or question that modernization is it required, especially for healthcare industry, which has always been at the cusp of innovation. And it has always been put to test. And I think it has come out successfully handling the COVID situation, just like what Yusuf was explaining. So what I want to do now, having established the fact that modernization is inevitable, right? And for healthcare industry, it is more the reason because uh, providing preventive healthcare, providing specialized healthcare to patients is becoming more and more required nowadays, right? So basically, um, how to modernize is something that I wanted to talk about in the next 4 slides. As Yusuf was talking about, acceleration is critical. How do you move from a traditional data analytics platform to a modern cloud-based or hybrid data analytics platform is what I want to tackle in the next 4 slides. So first, I want to handle the what does modernization mean? In an essence, when you talk about modernizing data analytics framework, what does it mean? So first, we want to define that. And I want to talk about what does acceleration mean? How can automation and acceleration be applied to that modernization process? And then I want to talk about our product DB Shift, which helps this acceleration and automation possible. And finally, I want to talk about a case study that we helped modernize one of our healthcare customers. So without further delay, what does modernization mean? In an essence, we are talking about the data acquisition, data storage, data processing, and the process to glean insights from data. This is what Yusuf was talking about in the modern data framework architecture, where he was talking about data sources, acquiring data from different data sources, harmonizing it, sensing useful information from it, and acting based on that insights gleaned, right? So if I have to technically put that into an architecture, we have these 3 pillars, what you see on the slide here. Now, at the heart of the slide is your data, and this includes, a typical, a traditional data warehouse sitting on an on-prem, environment like SQL Server or Oracle or, Teradata or Netezza, right? So all those, data being acquired from different sources and being stored in an environment like SQL Server is what constitutes the data layer. Now, surrounding this data layer, you have touch points that bring in data from different sources. And those sources can be internal to an organization, typically generated through your enterprise systems, patient management systems, and claims management systems, and so on for healthcare, and also from external sources like healthcare devices being employed, being adopted very rapidly nowadays. As an example, blood sugar monitor for diabetic patients, or for senior citizens, the overall behavioral monitoring systems, and so on. So getting data from all kinds of sources is what constitutes this ETL, or extract, transform, load layer. Now, on the other side of the data warehouse is the consumption layer, which kind of consumes the data primarily for analytics purposes. And typically, we have these tactical dashboards that talk about from an operational statistics perspective or patient satisfaction perspective, those kind of reports, standard reports, complaint reports that come out of data warehouses, as well as ad hoc analysis, applying machine learning or artificial intelligence techniques on that data. And plus data federation to other parts of the organization, or to outside parties like patients and insurance payers, or even partners and other vendors, and so on, is what constitutes the consumption layer. Primarily, it is used for business intelligence. So a modernization involves the migration of these 3 layers into a more modern platform. And we saw that the reason to do that is to get the right data, right insights to the right people at the right time through the right channel, right? And typically, enterprises will have a modernization strategy phase. Prior to actually modernizing it, they will talk about what does modernization mean from their perspective, and an implementation roadmap in terms of a phased approach. The first phase could be just the data migration, followed by the ETL migration, followed by BI migration. Now, as you can see here, as outlined here, in terms of how your modernization strategy is, you can decide to modernize all of these three layers at the same time, or you can do it in different combinations, right? And it could be very complicated, moving from an environment like SQL Server to an environment like a modern data warehouse, hybrid data warehouse environment like Yellowbrick. The structures are going to be completely different, and it involves a lot of rewiring of these touch points surrounding that data layer. And that's where I want to talk about the automation acceleration at every phase of this migration journey. And of course, it starts with a discovery and analysis phase, where you decide all of the different objects or components that need to be migrated in those three layers. Typically, if I have to go down one level lower, it involves, from a data perspective, all of the different databases, the tables, all of the data massaging infrastructure surrounding that, including stored procedures or functions or Python scripts. All of those things need to be listed out in terms of what is required to be migrated or modernized. Then what we do, what we call as an impact analysis, the relationship between these components, if you will. If I take a dashboard, the data lineage that kind of explains where the data is coming from, what kind of transformation logic are being applied to it, and all the way down to the data sources from which it is being extracted, is absolutely essential in order to do the migration really well. At the same time, it will help from a validation perspective as well. And then we do what we call as a structural mapping. As I was explaining before, let's say we are migrating from an environment like SQL Server, migrating to an environment like Yellowbrick involves mappings at different levels. At the lowest level, it involves table and columns and data types, SQL syntaxes, SQL Server specific functions or procedures that need to be migrated to Yellowbrick and so on. So we have that structural mapping also done as part of the discovery phase. And then comes the sizing and the setup. It depends on what volume of data you have, historical data migration, plus your incremental ETL SLAs. Define this the sizing, and based on which you set up an environment like Yellowbrick on the cloud, in terms of how many compute nodes that you need, and the storage capacity that you need, and so on. Then comes the major portion of the modernization, which is actually migrating the data plus the surrounding ecosystem. And we should also take into account in-flight projects, which have to be handled specifically because migrating historical data from an environment like SQL Server to Yellowbrick might have to be done at various phases based on the priorities, business priorities. And so that have to be identified earlier, and also a plan to handle those projects have to be in place. After the actual migration is where we have the validation, production deployment, and the most important phase is you monitor the resource and cost utilization for any runaway costs, or for efficiency monitoring. Now, where DB Shift, which is our product to accelerate and automate this modernization, plays a role, is that it plays a role in every single phase you see here. Right from getting the inventory list of all objects that need to be migrated, we have crawlers that kind of go into an environment like SQL Server or Teradata or Netezza to bring in all the objects and statistics around it in order to come up with a migration strategy. It also does an automatic impact analysis or data lineage, which is absolutely essential for validation. It also does a structural mapping between your source data warehouse and a modern hybrid data warehouse. It also comes with Terraform or CloudFormation scripts to set up this environment on the cloud. And we have the scripts, the ability to, as I was mentioning before, migrate your historical data multiple times, and not only that, also validate the data, migrated from your source environment to a modern data warehouse environment. And based on the environment, the validation strategies can be different. In most of the cases, we need to do what we call as a 100% validation, which is basically a cell-to-cell comparison between your source tables and your target tables. In some cases, it might be okay to do a random record check, or what we call as a metric stratification, where we just aggregate metrics at various levels to make sure the data that is migrated is the same. That can also be automated through dbShift. So at the core of dbShift, what we have is what we call as a mapper. As I was talking about, there are 3 layers of mapping that needs to be done, from a structural perspective, a functional perspective, and the ecosystem surrounding the data warehouse. Now, at the structural level, the lowest level is basically your tables, your table design strategy. If it is an environment like SQL Server, we might have indexes, and based on the complexity and volume of data, there can be different types of indexes or performance tuning strategies, including the query level. And then you obviously have this identity and access management that needs to be replicated to the target environment. Now, on top of the structural layer is where you have data massaging components like stored procedures and functions, materialized views, and scripts, SQL scripts. And the ecosystem that I was talking about is nothing but your ETL or ELT, based on how you design your load strategy from all of these different sources into the data warehouse after transformation, as well as on the consumption side through utilities or platforms like Tableau or Power BI, MicroStrategy, Looker, and so on. So all of these 3 layers have to be mapped, need to be migrated, and need to be validated. And that's where dbShift helps you accelerate this migration. What we have seen as part of our experience using dbShift for our modernization implementations is that it was able to achieve at least 70% of automation, taking care of all of the grunt work, all of the mapping work, that is required for the actual modernization. Now, with that, I just wanted to talk about an example use case of a modernization that we did for a skilled nursing facilities, or SNFs as they are called. It's a complete digital transformation, as Yusuf was talking about. Completely set up on the cloud, and we built automated pipelines to get data from all of these facilities. The results of that data warehouse is not only from an analytical perspective, but it was also used from an operational standpoint to more from a real-time perspective in terms of the available number of beds, patients being discharged that day, and things like that are very vital for skilled nursing facilities to make sure that the patients are taken care of. Now, we also extended that data analytics environment and added advanced analytics capabilities, and we help them predict the possibilities of patients getting readmitted after getting discharged from skilled nursing facilities. And we actually made it prescriptive to a level where they can know what kind of care that needs to be given to the patients who have a high risk of getting readmitted. What are those areas that need to be focused on in order to avoid them being admitted back? Right. So as I think I mentioned it before, healthcare is at the cusp of the innovation, as Yusuf was talking about, applying processes like RPAs and machine learning will greatly help healthcare companies to provide better healthcare for the patients. Hope I was clear in terms of outlining how dbShift can help this or accelerate this modernization process. Now I would like to hand it over to Mark to talk about Yellowbrick and how it fits into this modern data framework.
Thanks very much, Ramki. So I'm going to actually talk over the next 5 or 10 minutes a little bit more about the details around Yellowbrick itself. Now, Yellowbrick is a SQL relational database that's really focused on data warehousing use cases. And Yellowbrick is actually a well-established company. We're a global business based in Mountain View in California. We were founded in 2014, and we've been on the market selling our data warehousing solution since 2017. And our mission is broad in the same context that Yusuf was referring to. We're talking about how we can start to join and bring together data that's distributed across the enterprise, not just within one cloud or in multiple clouds, but even data that spans on-premises environments, the network edge, and public clouds, and make that wholly available to query via SQL. So as I mentioned, we're very much a strictly structured, highly relational SQL data warehouse. So we built the Yellowbrick data warehouse. It's really a database for large-scale analytics. It's massively parallel in the way that it scales out of the core database capabilities within inside. It's fully elastic as well. And we have full separated compute and storage from an architectural perspective. So when you're running in the cloud, you're storing your data in cheap and deep cloud object storage, and then spinning up compute nodes to run SQL queries and load activities, et cetera, et cetera. We're fully PostgreSQL compatible as well. Again, as part of that migration story, I think migration and the barriers to migration get a little bit easier when you know that you're going to be moving towards a Postgres compatible database. You have easier access to skill sets that the DBAs understand PostgreSQL from the start. And so although we're very, very different under the hood in terms of our implementation, we've preserved that layer of compatibility within our data warehouse of Postgres from the outside in. So we have one product, and this product basically runs everywhere. It's the Yellowbrick data warehouse. And so whether you choose to deploy on any one of the major public clouds, whether it's AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud, or whether you choose to deploy our solution within your own data center, is essentially the same software that runs everywhere. Now, we have a control plane called the Yellowbrick Manager, which is a web-based UI, which allows you to manage and provision data warehousing across all of these different clouds and on-prem environments. So it truly is a kind of a run anywhere solution. And I'm often asked, well, why are you different? How are you different from major competitors like Snowflake or some of the cloud provider offerings like Redshift or BigQuery or Azure Synapse, for example? Well, if you go through some of these differences and similarities, you'll see that rather like Snowflake, Yellowbrick is available in every single public cloud. Obviously, if you go for something like Redshift, you're limiting your choices to AWS. One area where we're very different from Snowflake is that we run in your own cloud account. So this means you're responsible for paying for your own infrastructure. The advantage of that is oftentimes our customers can command very, very large discounts with the cloud service providers based on the amount of cloud they consume. And so it makes a lot of sense for us to sell our software on a subscription or on-demand basis to our customers, and then they take advantage of the discounts they get with the major cloud providers to run the infrastructure under the hood. But we've automated this entire stack. It's an entirely microservices, Kubernetes-based database stack in its entirety, and it's completely automated. So we hide a lot of those infrastructure differences and difficulties. Now, one of the novel areas I think of innovation that we have in the product is even around our pricing. So we have a blended pricing model. We don't have credits in the way that many data warehouse providers in the cloud offer today. You can buy Yellowbrick on a subscription basis on a term of 1 year or 3 years, or consume it on demand. And we only charge for compute. We don't mark up storage. We don't mark up the cloud infrastructure. We just charge a simple software license based on the amount of compute you use, as I said, either on a fixed capacity subscription basis or on demand. Now, securing your data in your own cloud account is an area that we, again, distinguish ourselves from companies like Snowflake. When you install Yellowbrick in your own cloud account, you own your own data. What we find is that many of our customers have easier conversations with their IT compliance departments or external regulators when they know and understand that the control plane and the data plane of Yellowbrick reside fully under their own ownership. It's not a case of you're moving your data to somebody else's cloud account and they're managing it on your behalf. It never leaves your site. Now, again, rather uniquely in the data warehousing space, we can deploy the same solution in any public cloud, fully elastic, fully separated compute and storage, but also deploy this solution on premises as well. And so many of our customers who are in highly regulated industries like healthcare are generally adopting more of a hybrid cloud stance. They have some highly sensitive data that are yet not ready to move from their on-prem environments yet. But they're beginning to spin up new use cases in the cloud. And again, another area I think where we really distinguish ourselves from a technical perspective is our efficiency, especially at high concurrency levels. When you have many, many thousands of users all hitting a single Yellowbrick system, we can cope with that. We have examples of customers that have 8,000 concurrent users on these systems. We're running ad hoc queries over petabytes of data, and we're able to cope with those kinds of scenarios. So our customers have quite a few things in common. And one of the main things they have in common is the fact that they're using Yellowbrick in some level of business critical use case. In many cases, it often involves money, but obviously more importantly, from a healthcare perspective, it involves helping to manage patient journeys. So this stuff is really critical. It needs to stand up and stay up running 24/7. There are strict SLAs around the ELT and ETL processes that feed Yellowbrick, and strict SLAs around the reporting on the other side as well. And what we find ourselves doing is coming in, again, as part of that kind of Systech migration process that Ramki outlined, of replacing oftentimes legacy technologies like IBM Netezza, or replacing Hadoop, or going in and taking out Exadata from Oracle or Teradata. But actually, even more increasingly, what we're finding is that we're going in and helping out customers to better manage their cloud data warehousing spend. They're finding themselves, if they're using Snowflake, for example, they're finding their cloud bills are unpredictable at the end of each month. They're larger than they'd hoped for. And part of that problem is there's a general trend in the data warehousing industry of just throwing more compute capacity in the cloud at the problem. If you have a performance problem, throw more compute at it. And obviously, at the end of the day, that means a larger bill. And so with the efficiencies we've built into our software stack, we can do far more within the cloud using far fewer resources than any other competitor. And so we're finding ourselves going in and taking workloads from Snowflake or from Redshift and from others as the real pain points and sticker shock of managing cloud spend with those vendors comes into play. So just to summarize how we typically help, in the first instance, it's about usually modernizing some legacy database technology that could be getting towards end of life, or it could be a Hadoop system that's just not paying the benefit. It's just not delivering on the original promise. And customers who really want to modernize their stack and take on board the latest data warehousing technology that's fully elastic, for example. We're also helping customers in regulated industries on their journey to the cloud. So many customers, many enterprises have a cloud mandate, and we can help them modernize on premises if they want first, and then give them an easy route to move workloads to the cloud without going through heavy lifting and re-architecting or retooling their workloads in that way. So as I said, you can choose to deploy straight out of the box in AWS, Azure, or Google with us, or choose to have a hybrid configuration of data warehousing with Yellowbrick. Now, we do have some IP under the hood within Yellowbrick that really differentiates us. And so over the years, what we've been able to do is transfer a lot of the efficiencies that were built into on-prem data warehousing, where you had to squeeze as much capability out of a fixed footprint within a data center. And we've applied those efficiency approaches to cloud software as well. And so what you'll find is we can use far fewer EC2 nodes in AWS, for example, than the competition to deliver even more value. And we do that by having a really, really novel way of how we manage and minimize the overhead of taking data out of long-term storage like S3 and querying it on the fly within AWS. And it's something that often delivers a 10x performance improvement at a fifth of the cost. So we work very, very closely with partners like Systech to help string together this overall end-to-end migration process. As both Yusuf and Ramki have mentioned, oftentimes customers are starting with some legacy technology like Teradata or Netezza or Oracle or Hadoop or Sybase IQ, for example, and they're looking to modernize. And so they're using Systech's capabilities like DB Shift to do those workload dependencies assessments, to actually do a lot of the automation and heavy lifting to convert ETL processes and tools, to look at how you do those mappings for BI tools downstream, and to do those conversions that in many cases are very, very lightweight, because very often from a schema migration perspective, the mappings from a source database like Teradata or Oracle or SQL Server map on a one-to-one basis with what we have in Yellowbrick. Because remember, as I mentioned earlier on, from the outside in, we look and smell like a Postgres database. And so the migration process really becomes one of how do you migrate from a source legacy system to something that's Postgres compatible. As I mentioned earlier, again, under the hood, we're not Postgres. We've designed an MPP scale-out data warehouse that's more efficient than anything else there on the market. So I did want to end with another healthcare case study of a customer that chose to modernize their patient 365 patient journey applications and other applications as well with Yellowbrick. So they started off with Teradata, actually. And this particular healthcare provider is the fourth largest Blue Cross Blue Shield affiliated organization in the US. They provide health insurance to 5.6 million customers of theirs. And they had a real challenge here. They were really trying to get closer to real-time interactive capabilities and feedback, again, rather like the kinds of use cases that Ramki was talking about earlier. And they wanted to get more value out of the advanced analytics they had. And part of the problem was breaking down a lot of the silos of information that they had over with their entire organization. They wanted to get better in integrating the insurance data that they had about their patients with the clinical data as well. They wanted to close gaps and improve their predictive models around this. They also wanted, again, and I think Yusuf mentioned this, to start to look at how they understand how they pull features out of highly unstructured data, out of images and radiology pictures and data and videos and audio and genomics data, and how they can start to pull structure out of those and combine and integrate with other structured stacks around their organization and really get a stronger data management strategy across the whole organization. So what they did is they migrated their workloads from Teradata into a modern Yellowbrick data warehousing stack, but they also took the opportunity to start to pull in new sources from their Hadoop data lake. And they could do that because of the inbuilt connectivity that Yellowbrick has to data lake technologies like Hadoop or even Databricks, for example, and things like that. So it gave them an opportunity to start to pull in and process raw data in log format, raw claims information, data sources of images, for example, and do some pre-processing on those to extract structure and ultimately allow those things to be joined and analyzed within Yellowbrick. And this really benefited their business and their use cases in two ways. This healthcare organization provides a portal to their partners, so APIs that their partners will run applications directly against the data that they've integrated within this technology stack within the provider. But also there's self-service analytics happening within their own user community of data scientists and business analysts here who want fast answers to solve problems, who want to be able to iterate quickly and want to be able to get their hands on the latest trusted data across their organization. Now, at the end of the day, modernizing towards Yellowbrick and pulling in all these additional data sources enabled them to really reduce the time. For example, one key indicator, one KPI that they look for is the amount of time it takes around associating a patient to a particular provider. And what they're able to do is massively shrink that time and automate that time down. So they were basically being able to match a patient to the next provider in that patient's journey through that healthcare towards a better patient outcome in about 3.5 seconds, rather than getting it wrong and having to repeat this. So they were, from an efficiency perspective, massively reducing the time it took to actually for a patient to navigate this journey with huge cost savings and obviously better healthcare outcomes for the patient at the end of the day. And what they found after running this over a period of many months is that we're saving something like $36 million just by moving to much more of a real-time stance for matching providers to patients at the end of the day. Okay, and with that, I'm going to hand back to Ramki.
Thanks, Mark. So I just wanted to focus on the advanced analytics part of it and just drill a little bit deeper into what Yusuf was talking about in terms of how different technology components as well as analytics like RPA, artificial intelligence and machine learning as technology enablers can help healthcare industry in terms of doing their providing a better specialized and even more better preventive healthcare to patients. So I've listed down a few of those analytics use cases here, along with technology components like data lineage or data catalog platforms, which are absolutely required to make sure that all the regulatory compliances are being followed and their related business outcomes. And all of these are possible and they are made much more smarter, faster, more accurate by the modernization, by moving to a modern platform like Yellowbrick. I wanted to take a couple of quick examples and show you, a couple of live dashboards from this list. If you are interested in knowing more about any of these use cases, please feel free to reach out to us and we will be happy to schedule an offline one-on-one discussion with you and go in deeper into any of these use cases. So with that, the first thing that I wanted to showcase is the operational efficiency part of it. And being in the medical space, healthcare space, we know that a lot of information is in unstructured format. It could be X-rays or medical images, or it could be handwritten notes or free-form text where patient information about patient visits are recorded. Now there are a lot of models available which can be employed to gather key information from these images and documents. As an example, I have an ID card with different languages, especially a global healthcare provider will also have this challenge, not only understanding English based information, language based information from images, but also other languages as well. Now, the other challenge is that it can be in differing qualities, right? Image quality can be really bad. But there are models which are available to kind of extract key information, what we call as a named entity recognition from these images as well. Now, the same can be applied to forms which are either hand-filled or it could be filled electronically. Now, here are some examples of forms here. Now, as I said before, this could be a global healthcare company where the information is being filled in using multiple languages. And again, the key information could be generated from these documents as well. Now, the other form is the free-form text I was talking about. Typically, patient visits are recorded using free-form text, and it could be handwritten, hand-filled, or it could be electronic as well. Again, the same process can be applied to extract key information from those kind of unstructured data as well. Right. So RPA are being extensively used in the healthcare industry to kind of automate some of the processes and make the job of a healthcare provider a lot easier and focus on how to provide a better healthcare to patients. Now, the other example I wanted to showcase today is the patient readmission use case that I was talking about. Now, this one helps, for patients who have a high possibility of getting readmitted to hospitals. It can be very vital in order to provide preventive health care for them in order to avoid readmissions. Now, what we have here is based on the diseases or diagnosis, you can look at the top factors that are influencing patient readmissions. And you can also drill down to individual patient level and identify which factors are contributing to a high risk of getting readmitted. Now, you can classify patients into different categories, no risk, medium risk, low risk, and high risk. And you can focus on patients with higher risk and higher chance of getting readmitted. Now, this particular patient has an issue with a body mass index, probably overweight, and he also has adverse reactions to certain drugs being administered to him. So when that patient is being discharged, we can actually provide prescriptions in order to make sure that his body mass index stays where it is, or it can be lowered. And at the same time, we can prescribe medications which don't have adverse reactions to that particular patient. So a lot of advanced analytics use cases like this one are possible. And I think modernization will help healthcare providers to provide better healthcare to patients. With that, I'll hand it over to Vaishnavi.
Hey, thanks, Ramki. Absolutely, the great insights, and thank you to Yusuf and Mark as well. We'll go ahead into the Q&A section, and as a reminder, please make sure you type your questions in the Q&A box at the control panel. And thank you for participating in our polls, which we are running in tandem in our chat. We'll give it a couple of minutes for the questions to come in, and hope you are participating in all the polls as well. And since we don't have any questions from the group that is on, I'll say if you have any questions in the future, please reach out. I will share our contact info here. So we have come to the end of the session. Yeah, I don't see any questions coming yet. So, yes, thank you all for attending the presentation today, and we will be sharing the recording of today's live webinar along with the poll results. Thank you, Mark, Yusuf, and Ramki for sharing your insights, and a big thank you to Yellowbrick for joining us and co-presenting this webinar with us. And again, feel free to reach out if you'd like a deeper dive. And if you have some other questions, and please don't hesitate to email us at info@systechusa.com. And thanks again for joining us. Before you go, please take a moment to fill out the survey at the end of the session, and see you all next time.